Okay. All right, so I'm going to go over a couple of things today. We're going to finish the introduction to Fahrenheit 451. We're going to look at the rest of that Pear Deck activity. And then that's it. Okay, but I do want to show you that yesterday I did put this on Google Classroom because of the Hoopla issue that we discovered in this bell of it. Was it in this bell that it wasn't on Hoopla? Okay, so I did find a PDF and I compared it to my book and it's exactly the same. So I don't know why I did this, but I just didn't change it. There's the link to the PDF if you want the link. It's right there. Then there's I downloaded the PDF and I put it there. So there's that guy. But then I did end up just copying and pasting the PDF onto a Google Doc, which at first I was like, this is not ideal for reading. But now, what is happening? Now that I've thought about it, it actually might be nice to read this from a Google Doc for the sake of like taking notes and highlighting and underlining and stuff. It's actually really nice to have it on a Google Doc. I do all of that in my book. I have a couple of hard copies, maybe 10 I found. So if you prefer to read in a book, you can. But we take so many notes as we discuss the literature that you may want to actually read on the Google Doc. It might be better for you. Yeah. This is the full book. So the full book, and I went through and I like almost reread the entire thing. I like skimmed through the whole thing. But I specifically checked the beginning and ends of different parts. But this entire book is only, I think, 158 pages. And the font in it is pretty big. So it makes sense that on a Google Doc, it's about 81 pages. But I do think like you're going to want to make your own copy of the Google Doc if you're going to read it from here. And even if you don't, it might be nice just to make a copy anyway, because like if you want to take notes, like as we're talking and you want to highlight things or whatever, or you can even like add comments off to the side, you can do all of that stuff on a Google Doc. So it might be actually nice to read it on a Google Doc. The downside of it is if you're reading from the screen the whole time, which is annoying, but we're used to that at this point. So you do have that option. So if you do not have a physical book, you don't have an ebook, this is the entire book on a Google Doc. Okay. So everybody has access to the text now, which is good. They're also though on Hoopla, so the actual book wasn't in there unless you know French, but the ebook was, or not the ebook, the audiobook. So if you're somebody who wants to like listen to it as you're following along, you can get the audiobook on Hoopla still and like listen and follow along in the reading. So that was available. I don't know why the text wasn't and the audiobook was, but the audiobook is on Hoopla. So if you still want to get the app and get Hoopla to listen to the book, you can. Most of your reading is going to be done outside of class. Like you will come to class prepared with having read the text for homework. The exception is going to be tomorrow. Tomorrow in class, we're going to have a reading day. And I told my second period that if they want to bring drinks or snacks, if somebody wants to bring cookies to share, we'll have like a nice, cozy reading day tomorrow. That doesn't happen really ever. But because of the way that the scheduling worked out, like we're going to be done with the intro today and we can't really do anything else until we've read. So I either give you homework tonight or you read in class tomorrow. And they obviously voted, can we have a reading day tomorrow? So I said yes. So tomorrow, Thursday, we'll read. I'll give you how much needs to be read, and then we'll have a reading day. So if you want to bring drinks or snacks, then just hang out and read in here tomorrow. Not like reading together. It's going to be like read your day. Okay. If you want to listen to the audiobook while you read, then make sure you have headphones tomorrow. Anybody have questions about that? But if you don't have a book, have no fear. Google Docs is here for you. You can read right here. Okay, so that will make my job a little more complicated because I like most of my slides are set up with like page 150. And now I'm gonna have to be like starting with this word. I don't know how we're gonna do that, but we'll figure it out. Okay, yes. You're amazing. So yeah, that's what we'll do. This is why teenagers rule, because you know more than me. I knew you could do that on Google Sheets. I just would have never thought about doing it. But you rule. Okay. So let's look at the Pear Deck really quickly. I don't think it'll take us long to get through this. We had some time left over at the end of the bell second period, especially because there's so few of us in here. We'll probably get through it pretty quickly. Some of you already finished the entire Pear Deck up to the stop sign. And if you did, amazing. If you didn't, make sure you track with us so you answer all those questions and get all the points. How do we feel today? I feel middle of the road. Thank you for asking. Okay, go away. Okay. So, just so you know, the big thing that we are going to be paying attention to in this book is themes and the symbolism. There's a lot of symbolism. I'm going to point it out to you like crazy as we read. Your final assignment will probably have something to do with symbolism. I'm going to try to figure out tonight what your final assignment will be because I don't think it's going to be what I've done in years past. That way, as we start reading, you can take notes from the get-go on what you need to know. Okay. Anyway, so we talked about censorship yesterday. We left off there. I'm just going to overview these slides because hopefully, you can read them as I talk. But the second major theme in the text is this idea of ignorance versus knowledge. And we hit on this a little bit yesterday, but this is a society where ignorance is bliss. Have you heard that saying before? Like, ignorance is bliss. Like, the less you know, the happier you are. And a lot of times that's true. Like, think about people who are like, I'm not an adult. I don't have to think about politics. Those people are way happier than the people who are like totally involved in all of the drama that goes with the political atmosphere in our country. Those people are a little bit more miserable, right? Just stereotype. So sometimes it's better not to know what's happening. And that's the society that they've created. Like, there's a literal war going on over their heads, and nobody knows. Nobody cares. Occasionally, there's like a radio announcement that's like, planes are approaching, and they're like, okay, whatever. But like, as long as you don't think about it, it doesn't exist. And that's kind of the mentality of the people in this book. So the way that they continue to promote that is they destroy things that will help them gain knowledge. So anything that's going to help people learn or think or question society is destroyed. But nobody cares about that either because they think that they're happy, right? So like, if somebody in here, like, I knew that you had a book, I would call and tell on you, and then your books would be destroyed and you would be arrested because you are a threat to this happy society. Huh? Okay, so that is one thing, like the people who are ignorant versus knowledgeable and who really is better off. The second one is that we hit on this yesterday too a little bit about what happens to society when we depend too much on technology. And this is the idea of like, we deaden the human experience. And I think some of you said this yesterday. Is something I'm saying funny, or are you doing something else on your computer? Okay, so we talked about this yesterday, that deadening the human experience. The more reliant we become on technology, the less of humans we become. Like, we don't know how to do things for ourselves. We don't really have to think because we can just look things up, all of that kind of stuff. We don't have to socialize in person because we can text. So we lose that human experience. And then this goes on to say, like in the book, for fun, kids like go and race their cars and people just die all the time. And it's like, it's okay. It's no big deal because there's no relationships there because they don't have anything to talk about because they really don't know anything. And so like the way they deal with their feelings is they go down to like a junkyard and like hit cars with sledgehammers to get out their anger because they don't know what else to do. And nobody reads poetry or goes on walks or anything like that. Nobody listens to music. And like at one point a character cries and all of her friends are like, what is happening? Like, what is coming from her eyes? Why is that happening? Because it's just emotions that they're not used to feeling. Nobody feels emotions. And then the last one is this idea of individual versus conformity, individuality versus conformity. This is a society where everybody's the same because nobody thinks for themselves. So like everybody is pretty much just like everybody else. And then Guy, his name is Guy because he's like the average guy, right? So names tend to have significance in literature. He wakes up from this society and realizes, like, somebody asks him if he's happy and he realizes that he doesn't even know what that means, and he starts to see all of the problems. But you know, like a lot of times when you become an individual, when you've conformed for so long, that makes you a target. Think about even in your social circles, like if one day you're like, you know, I don't really like doing this, like I don't want to go or whatever, and then people are like, what's wrong with you? You know? So like all of a sudden he was like targeted for being different. Okay, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but this is science fiction. Again, this is somebody writing in the 1950s, and his thought process is, what if things continue to progress technologically? What will the world look like? So obviously we are in that fiction, which is super hard for us to grasp. When you read, you're constantly like, yeah, this seems right. But this was written in the 1950s, and we have to keep that in mind. Like 1950s world was way different than this world. And then a dystopia is the opposite of a utopia. If you know what a utopia is, it's considered like a perfect world. A dystopia is where they assume that it's a perfect world and things have gone tragically wrong, right? So like in their minds, this is the perfect society, but as somebody reading it, you're like, what the heck is going on? Like, this is terrible. Okay, so that's what a sci-fi dystopia is. But actually, when you read it, you're going to probably be thinking, like, do we live in a dystopia currently? Because um, it kind of points out all of the things wrong with our society. Okay, I think it's important to know certain terms and certain characters before the book starts. So that way you don't have questions as you start. The more you know before reading this book, the less questions you will have as you read the book. So Guy Montag is your first important character. They call him Montag. They call him by their last name. He's a fireman, so that happens sometimes. Notice it says he's described as dark and he smells like kerosene, obviously because he's with fire all the time. And this is the opposite reality. They start the fires, so they need the kerosene. Firemen are the police, like the peacekeepers, kind of. They're the ones who destroy instead of the ones who put out fires in this world. But every single fireman is described with dark features. Okay, what are you doing? Nothing I'm saying is funny, so I don't know what you're laughing at, except for the fact that you're clearly on something else on your computer. Okay, every single fireman is going to have dark features. They're going to be described with dark hair. They're going to have soot on them. They're going to be in dark clothing. You will know when somebody is a not so good person in the book because when they enter the room, there will be shadows. They will talk about how dark their eyes are. It's very, very, very evident when people are good and when people are not good. So pay attention to those images. That is a symbol that's huge in the book. The other firemen's names are like Stone, maybe just Stone, Black, I don't remember. Beady, like beetle, right? It's got that creepy imagery. So you will know when people are not so good and when they're good. The opposite is Clarice. She is 17 and crazy, is the way they describe her. She smells like strawberries and apricots as opposed to kerosene. Her skin is described as like glowing like the moon. Every time she's present, she's like walking in the moonlight or there's some brightness, some white imagery. So just like in most literature, darkness describes like the evilness or like the shadiness, and then anything with white and brightness is going to be your goodness in the book. So when you meet characters, pay attention to the way that they are described and you'll know kind of where they fit into that story. Mildred is Guy's wife, and you will hate her. She's awful. We'll talk more about her later. And then Captain Beatty is his boss, and again, his name's Beatty, like Beetle, and he's sketchy. I'm not going to give you much detail about him, but notice I say pay attention to him. He's super mysterious, and he's worth paying attention to. We'll talk about him as we continue. So some symbols to know about are I think I told you this yesterday. That's the temperature that paper burns. So 451 is like their badge number, like their unit number. If you don't know what a hearth is, every part, there's 3 parts in the book. The first part is called the salamander and the hearth, or the hearth and the salamander. Okay, so a hearth is from a fireplace, right? So it's the part of the fireplace that like holds the fire in. And a salamander, if you don't know this, is unaffected by the flames. So like it probably can't live in fire. Like it can't be like, I'm gonna camp here overnight and probably die. But it can run through fire and not be affected. Okay, so just keep that in mind as we read this first book, or this first part of the book, like what the hearth is and what the salamander is. Obviously, I just talked about darkness and light. And then this idea of a phoenix, if you don't know what a phoenix symbolizes in life, like a phoenix is renewal. So it rises from the ashes. When everything burns down, the phoenix bird would rise from the ash. And so pay attention for that symbol too. Okay, some things we need to be aware of. We already talked about the phoenix, but we need to be aware of these 2 things. And yesterday I told you about the parlor walls. Remember, it's the TVs that are the size of the wall and they're interactive. Millie, or Mildred, Guy's wife, calls them her family. Okay, so when she talks about her family, people get very confused. She's not talking about literal people. She's talking about these characters that she plays. Like imagine like real like life-size version of like Sims or something like that, where you just interact with these characters, these in this world that you created. That's what she calls her family. So when she gets upset about her family, it's the TV. Okay. And then the mechanical hound is this creepy giant machine that the firemen use to track people. So say we get a call at the firehouse that Emily is reading books. She's got them stored. She's, spreading lies. She's talking about things. Then they would call in a call on Emily. And then would be able to program this thing to like track her with her scent or whatever. And then it would track her. And if she didn't like go willingly, see that, I don't know if you can see it, like this needle coming out of its mouth, and it would like stab her, and then she would be like paralyzed and they could take her away. Okay. So that's the mechanical hound. Now, the mechanical hound is not a real living, breathing thing. It has to be programmed. So keep that in mind. When it reacts to somebody, it has been programmed to do so. It can't think for itself. So that's something that you need to remember as we read the book. Okay, so now let's get to this part. Have you guys done these yet? If you have not answered these questions, I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes, and I want you to go through these slides. There's 3 of them. There's 10 questions. It should take you very little time at all. Again, do this because this is participation points and you want points in your grade book. So it says if you agree with the statement, do nothing. If you disagree, just drag one of the X's and put it on top of the statement. Okay. It shouldn't take you very long at all. Do the 3 slides, and then we'll have a little bit of a discussion, and then we have 1 slide left after that. I'm going to pause my recording. Okay, so let's start on this first slide. This is just about the government in general. So this is actually really an interesting topic because I don't know how much you pay attention to politics, but this is relevant right now in our political atmosphere. Because like, for example, President Trump is banished from, well, old President Trump is banished from Twitter and like Facebook and stuff. Like he's not allowed to have an account, right? So a lot of people have been throwing around this idea of censorship, like he's being censored by the government. However, the reason that they're allowed to do that is because those are private entities, right? Like Facebook and Twitter are private companies, so it's not government censorship, it's private censorship. But could the government fix that? So this is a question that is like seriously like going on in our country. Like, should the government step in and say, hey, you can't do that. Like, he's a person who's allowed to say what he wants, right? So this is a debate that's being had currently. But think about this in general. When we think about the government, and obviously you probably haven't thought about it as much as I have because you're younger than me, but in general, how much say should the government be able to have in our lives? What do you think? Does anybody have a response to that? Like, as far as censoring us, as far as the laws that are created, what's in the best interest of the people, how do we think the government comes into play there? What do you think? Yeah. Okay. So maybe certain people. I did not know that was a law. Interesting. Right. Right. Huh. And there's so many levels of government. So, like, we automatically think national government, but there's like government just in Monroe, you know? Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. When we think of national government. Hmm. Hmm. Sure. Good. Yeah. Yeah. Like, there's no cap on like the Congress. Good. So is it benefiting us? Maybe some things, but is everything? Doesn't seem like it, right? And yeah, it's interesting. Interesting. Okay. That's a hard conversation to have without getting people too mad. So we're gonna go to the next slide. But be thinking about that as we're reading. Okay, so this one is more about happiness. And I really like these. I think that the first one, well, let's talk about the first one. In order to be a really truly free society, we need to be educated. Yes or no? Yeah, I think that's pretty, everybody across the board says yes. But let's talk about these last two questions and this idea of what is true happiness. So this talks about if you're entertaining, if you're being entertained, if you're playing, if you're, not working so hard, is that true happiness? What do we think? Yeah, go for it. You may not be happy. You're entertained. Those are two different things. Sure. Good. I think that a really good thing to think about is think about when COVID, like this whole lockdown started, and it was like, here's spring break. You get to never come back. And at first, we're like, yes. And then you're like, I want to sit on the couch and watch Netflix all day. This is amazing. And eventually, you're like, not entertained anymore. And what do you miss? You miss like being able to hug your friends. And you're like, I just want to see my friends and I just want to be with people. Right. And so we realize how important that connection is eventually. Like, I'm not going to lie, when they were like, you can stay home for a while, I was like, I'm pretty happy to be home and not have to see people, And then eventually it's like, I would give anything to see my students and hug them, even the one I hated. Like, I just want to see his face. So eventually you lose. I mean, one day of him would have been plenty. But anyway, you eventually lose that, like, you know, human touch, which is what this whole entire book is about. Are we entertained or are we truly happy? And in relationship is obviously normally where we find our happiness in our relationship with each other and ourselves. Okay, books are becoming obsolete. Yes or no? Yes. Some people say yes. Anybody say no? Physical books, probably, right? But we still read. I think a lot of people still read, just maybe not like this, the physical book. Okay, what about these idea? I'm going to skip the second one. Let's look down at the technology and the youth, you youngins. What do we think about you? Okay, so technology brings more positive than negative. What do we think? You don't think so? Why? When we think about relationships, probably not. Not always. I mean, it can connect us to people across the world, though. But I see both sides, so I agree with you and I disagree with you. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay, very good. Yeah, technology has done amazing things for us. Like we were able to make a vaccine in a third of the time it normally takes, for example, because of technology. Right. Self-regulating. Very good. Okay, let's talk about you young people. In second period, they were very hard on your generation. They were like, no, we're frivolous and we don't pay attention to important things. What do you guys think? You agree with that? What do you think? Yeah. That is so true. Let me tell you, I really love that you said that because when I first started teaching at Monroe, which was 14 years ago, so like you guys were just being born, I was shocked how many people had never left like not even been to Cincinnati, like never left the city. And I was like, what? You know, because I did do a lot growing up. Like my parents, we traveled all over and stuff. So that's true. That like the exposure to things is important. So you do end up doing like frivolous, stupid stuff because you don't have anything else to do. That's true. I also disagree with. Hold on. What else do you guys say? Do you guys think that the youth in general, not just Monroe youth, not just your school, in general, your generation, what do you think? Yeah.
I feel like there are and they don't want the kids to be exposed to it. Then when they get exposure, they don't want to have the conversation, and then like eventually the kid will do it because they like don't know.
Sure.
And then
Parents suck. That's what we're coming down to. It's all the parents' fault. Yes. Uh-huh. Sure. And good activities. Yeah.
but also with the technology and like the other like before all like our iPads and stuff, like you had to entertain your child. Like you
Yeah.
couldn't just like give them an iPad and say,
That's
"Don't
true.
know." Like they're I don't know, you had to like actually do things with them and make them do things. Now
Yeah, technology is a scapegoat for parents too,
Yeah.
for sure. I give my kid a phone freaking all the time. Like, just take it, just shut up. I'm sorry. I'm a good parent. People listening at home, if the mom hears this, I promise. Okay, go ahead. Yes, that's true. That's true. It's everybody. Yeah. I do think that you guys are hard on yourselves, though. I think your generation as a whole is way more aware of things like world problems and like pollution and all of this stuff that like I didn't care about growing up. But because of technology, you are more aware, and there are a lot of kids who are doing amazing things, you know, to like change the world. Maybe not here in this classroom, but overall, I think you're way more self aware and aware of things in the world and problems in the world than people my age. That's just my opinion. Interesting. I think that's interesting. The kids in this book, so just so you know, they kill each other for fun. Okay. All right, let's go to this last slide. If you haven't answered these questions, just take a minute to do so. If you had to pick one book or text worth saving, what do you think it would be? Like physical text. Two, what are things worth fighting for? You don't even have to write complete sentences, just list them. And then the last question, I like this question a lot. Do you believe society will be improved or declined 50 years from now? So when you're mid 60s, do you think that our world will be better off or worse based on things that are happening currently? What do you think? Okay, so just answer those questions when you're done. You don't have to submit, you don't have to do anything. I can pull up the teacher dashboard and make sure you answered everything, give you credit. And then tomorrow we are going to start reading. So if you have a book, bring it. If not, then you can read on the screen. And yeah, that's going to be our day tomorrow. I'm going to give you a whole bell of reading.